if they listen to their PR people, and sometimes people don't listen to their PR people, but if they listen to their PR people, I'm sure they're telling them that, yeah, right, you've made your point, you had Spare, you had Netflix, you had the Oprah Winfrey interview, you've got it all off your chest. Now's the time to row back a bit and try and build some bridges, or at least create a life for yourself. And obviously the Nigeria trip, they were trying to do that. The jury's out as to whether that was a good idea. I mean, some people called it a sort of quasi-royal tour, and I'm not sure that the palace would have been particularly happy about it. But we can't stop them doing these things if they want to. But it's now time for them really to focus on positive things and not just keep slagging off the royal family.
Yeah, I think they are trying, but you talk about their team. You know, I'm constantly interested in who they have around them, because, you know, Prince William and King Charles, they would have a private secretary, they would have a team, they would have a team that links into the Foreign Office or to embassies overseas. Harry and Meghan don't have that. So if they were, you mentioned about Nigeria, so if they were potentially, that we hear that they might want to go on more tours without they might have a good PR team or have a PR, you know, people spinning everything good that they are doing when they go on these tours. They need private secretary systems. They need staff that can help them on the ground, link up with embassies, link up with you know, other with the government and the Foreign Office and stuff like that. That's something that concerns me going forward.
Yeah, I mean, they could very easily have, you know, blundered into some kind of political problem in Nigeria. I mean, all right, Charles isn't head of state in Nigeria, but it's obviously a very important country, very prominent member of the Commonwealth. So, you know, there is a danger that they could easily blunder into some sort of diplomatic incident if they make the wrong moves, and get blamed almost as if they are royals, even though they're not representing the royal family. So it's a difficult one, but you know, they're playing to a global audience. They're not just playing to the Commonwealth or to the British public. In fact, the British public's probably the last thing on their mind. You know, they're playing to their audience in America, around the world, and that's what they're going to concentrate on.
Yeah, 100%. When we opened, Phil, I explained obviously that you've been working in the 80s and 90s.
Yes.
And what I love to hear, and we have discussed stuff like this in the past, but what I love to hear is some old interaction with royals and old kind of events. So going back to your early days when you were reporting for The Sun, what kind of leaps out? You know, what would you tell your grandchildren? You know, what's the ones that you bore people down the pub with?
Lots of things leap out. I mean, obviously, I was very lucky to be in an era when we were following Diana around the world, Charles and Diana. And we didn't just go on royal tours, we went on their holidays as well. So we went to all the ski trips and the Virgin Islands.
I'm not interrupting you, but you weren't invited on those holidays, were you?
No, we weren't invited, no, but it was kind of, that we came to a sort of tacit agreement where we'd take some photographs on the first day, and then theoretically we left them alone. But we had to stay in the ski resort to make sure that there were no sort of, you know, problems. So it was like a sort of free ski holiday, really. But anyway, it was, but to be serious, I mean, some of the, you know, iconic moments that I was with her, I always remember in Brazil. We went to Brazil, and at the time she was very much doing this campaign about AIDS, and she picked up an AIDS baby in an orphanage in Sao Paulo, and even some of my hard-bitten colleagues were in tears, but the nurses were in tears because they'd never had anyone like this. You know, there was this stigma about AIDS at the time. So it was really groundbreaking. And to be there when she was doing some of this stuff was looking back on it was you know, quite historically important. So stuff like that stands out. I mean, funnily enough, one of the greatest pinch me moments I had was when I was covering Princess Anne, and she was the first royal in sort of modern times to go to Moscow when the Berlin Wall had come down, and Gorbachev was in power, and I was lucky enough to to draw the short straw as the person who had to go into the Kremlin. And cover the event, and it was an incredibly boring event. Actually, it was, all they did was talk about the weather, if I seem to remember. But I stood there in the office of the president of Russia, or president of the Soviet Union at the time, Gorbachev, in his office, and I'm thinking to myself, not many people get to do this. This is probably where Putin now sits, and so it was quite a remarkable moment, and not many people can say that. So this job does, as you know, takes you to some amazing places, and you know, and it enables you to do some incredible things that you wouldn't otherwise do.
You're very lucky with Princess Anne. I don't do enough Princess Anne jobs. She's going to be at D-Day next week, and she's doing a lot of jobs.
I think in the last few years, especially since the Queen died, and people saw how she reacted and stayed with her coffin all the way, and saw how hard she works. I think she's now finally getting the credit she deserves. I mean, going back sort of 40, 50 years ago, she got a terrible press. She hated the press. She used to tell us to naff off, which is frequently quoted in the press. And she hated us, and she got a bad press. But now I think people have finally realised, how hard she's been working, carrying out something like, 500 engagements a year. And she's now in her, mid-70s. And I think people have finally, seen the real Anne and appreciate her for it. And a lot of people, of course, think that she would be a much better monarch than some of the other people who are way ahead. I think she's now dropped down to 17th, I think, in line to the throne, which is quite incredible when you think about it.
I don't think she's bothered about that. Honestly,
no, she's not bothered about
it. But when she does these trips, I'm fascinated by that Moscow trip for so many reasons. But Princess Anne, she doesn't do it for press. She doesn't do it for coverage for the people. She's doing it out of a sense of duty.
Yeah.
Right. She just before the Platinum Jubilee, she went to Papua New Guinea with a tiny team. Like, literally 3 or 4 people.
Yeah.
When the king goes abroad, it's a huge army.
She's
of
never
stuff.
encouraged the press to go with her, to be fair. I sometimes think that's a mistake. You sometimes get a reporter and a photographer will go for a magazine. I think there was a piece in the Telegraph recently, which was a very interesting piece when you see her up close and personal doing this. And of course, she was always compared to Diana. People said, well, when Diana came along and started picking up babies and kissing them and this sort of thing, that's something that as president of Save the Children Fund for all these decades, she would never do, Princess Anne. She had a completely different style. But that doesn't mean to say that she doesn't get things done, doesn't mean to say that she doesn't bring attention to the causes where she's in Africa or somewhere else or in Asia or wherever it is, the Caribbean. And she's done a fantastic job. And as I say, I think she's finally, all these years later, getting the recognition for it.
Yeah, so she'll be at D-Day, as I say, doing several engagements.
Yeah.
The King and Queen will be doing working with some. They'll be meeting some British veterans both in Portsmouth and on the beaches in Normandy by a new memorial. Prince William, interestingly, will be on Omaha Beach with the world leaders.
Yeah.
I just, off the top of my head, I was just thinking that is quite a step up. For Prince William, he's going to be with Macron. I think there's like 25 world leaders there, not Putin. They're not.
What's the word you're getting on that, Matt? Is that to save the king from doing too much, or is that to promote William? I mean, I think it's probably a bit of both, isn't it? Showing him as a future king, showing how important he now is and the status he now has. Also, he served in the armed forces. He was kept away from the front line like the king was. I mean, both of them regret the fact that they weren't allowed to go to the front in any way, shape or form. And Harry and that is the sadness, and the other sadness, of course, that Harry and Andrew, the two people who have actually served in war theatres in recent decades, can't take part because of their own behaviour, which is a great shame and a great irony. But no, I think that's fascinating that William is going to take this very important, prominent role. And be seen alongside world leaders. So I think it's probably partly to spare the king so he doesn't do too much, but partly to promote William.
I think so, and I think he kind of deserves it, to be honest.
Yeah.
As you say, he has himself been trained in the armed forces.
Yeah.
And he's kind of emerging almost like as a diplomat. And I know he works very close with with the king.
What was he voted recently in a poll in America? The world, I think, most popular person in the world, wasn't he? Something like that.
Or the most popular royal.
Well, I think he was one of the most popular people in the world, and he's now got an incredible following all over the world. And when he speaks, be it about the environment or something else, people listen to him. And I think this is another indication of his maturing, his growing up and coming to the fore.